Well, hello there. I'm your host for today, Dr. Kate Kresge, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Rudrani Banik. She is an incredible neuro-ophthalmologist with over 20 years of experience. She's also certified in integrative and functional medicine. She uses a natural approach to helping people prevent and reduce their migraine occurrences. She's also a migraine sufferer herself, so her story is really powerful and inspirational if you are currently having migraines. You can definitely do so many things to help reduce them. We're going to dive into it today. Dr. Rani Banik, welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kate. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Me and the entire team have been so looking forward to this podcast. I've got a ton of questions for you about your area of expertise. Now, you are a neuro-ophthalmologist and functional medicine certified practitioner. You also have multiple books on nutrition and eye health. And so I'd love to hear your story. I'm fascinated. How did you get here?
Yeah, so first of all, when I was doing my training in medicine, I love the eye, but I also love the brain. And it was really kind of hard for me to choose which one should I focus on? Should I be an ophthalmologist? Should I be a neurologist? I ended up choosing ophthalmology because I love the eye and it's such a beautiful organ and vision is so precious. And I was so excited to be able to help people regain their vision. But the neurology part always kind of was in the back of my mind. So when it came to choosing a fellowship, I decided to do a fellowship in neuro-ophthalmology because then it brings the two together. So like the way the eye functions and all the connections with the brain and all the muscles and nerves, et cetera. So I love that. And I was practicing as a neuro-ophthalmologist for a long time, I'll put it to you that way, in academics. So I was in academic practice. I was working for one of the major medical institutions here in New York City where I live, and teaching, doing research, et cetera. And there was a really stressful period in my life. And this is now, wow, it's almost 10 years ago. And so it was really challenging because I was suffering with my own medical condition, which is migraine. And I'd had migraines when I was younger. When I was in my early 20s, 30s, I would get a migraine maybe once or twice a year. But during this period in my life, I developed such severe headaches. I would actually wake up every day with a headache, with a migraine. And if you've ever had a migraine, you know it's bad enough to get a single episode, but to imagine like getting episodes every single day. So there was a lot going on with work. At home, we were doing a complete like gut renovation project. So I was exposed to a lot of toxins and fumes and stress and everything. So it all built up to lead me to this chronic migraine. And I tried everything initially. I went to all the top doctors in New York City that I knew who treated migraine, and I was prescribed medicine after medicine after medicine. Nothing was helping. And not only that, but if it did work, it was only partially working, and then it would give me side effects. So I'd feel like I was in a brain fog all the time, like a zombie walking around. So after a few years of trying all these different drugs, I said, you know what? This is not the answer. I need to find a different solution. So I started to do some digging. And first of all, I saw that, oh, there are supplements that can be used for migraine. Like, how come none of my doctors ever mentioned to me about taking supplements? So that was kind of shocking. And then I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he said to me, why don't you try an elimination diet? And I looked at him and I was like, what is that? What's an elimination diet? I laugh about it now, but this was like all just totally new to me. And so he explained it. He's like, it's basically an approach we use in functional medicine. He was dual trained also in traditional medicine and also functional medicine. So he just did his certification, and he was explaining to me about the training and the modules and learning about mitochondrial health and the nutrients that support mitochondrial health. And I was like, wow, how come no one ever told me about this? Like using diet. And meanwhile, I had like the worst diet in the world. Dr. Kate, I like cringe when I think about this. I was living off of pizza and ice cream and diet cherry Coke for years, years. And I never once thought that, oh, maybe my diet's contributing to my migraines. Like never once did it cross my mind. None of my doctors ever asked me, like, what are you eating? How much stress is in your life? Like, how much do you sleep? How much caffeine do you have? None of those questions ever came up. So when my colleague said, try an elimination diet, I said, you know what? I'll do whatever it takes. So I tried it. And not only that, I was also so intrigued by functional medicine. I went to IFM, I went to the courses, and I took the first week long course, AFMCP. And I was like, wow, this is like a whole new world opening up to me that I'm just so intrigued by, and also I was kind of upset that my traditional training never taught me any of this. We only had about like 4 hours in nutrition, that which is really ridiculous. But so anyway, that's how I got here, is through my own journey. And so, by the way, I started to institute some of these changes in my own life, and finally my migraine started to turn around, and I was like, wow, this really worked for me after like 4 years of having a daily migraine. And then I started experimenting in my patients. And the ironic thing is, I'm a neuro-ophthalmologist. I take care of patients with migraine, but I also have migraine myself. And so I started to use these strategies, and it worked. And I would say a lot of these strategies worked in about 75% of my patients, and I could get them off of their medications using nutrition and lifestyle and supplementation and botanicals. I was just a convert at that point. I was like, okay, that's it. I need to do this for my career. So I quit my job in academic medicine. I did because I couldn't practice this way in an academic center. Like, you only get like 10, 15 minutes with each patient. There's no way you could apply a functional medicine approach. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question. So I apologize for that lengthy answer, but that's how I got here.
It's fascinating, and I'm so glad you're better. I can't imagine a migraine every day for years and trying to take care of patients. And you have like a number of studies that you've published, multiple. You were busy and someone who was performing at a really high level despite your pain. And so to hear that you were able to heal that and just have that burden lifted off of your shoulders through functional medicine is really inspiring. And I think it's going to inspire a lot of people today. And it's why I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing now.
Oh, thank you. No, it really means a lot. And it was life changing, but it also was career changing. It changed how I practice, how I treat my patients. And I think patients are looking for answers. They don't want to be on medications. And it's so amazing that now I have this knowledge base that I can use and help them to improve their symptoms also. So I'm really grateful. I'm so grateful.
We're going to get to kind of like the practical, tactical migraine starter kit. Like, what do you need to know? What are the nutrients you need to know about? What are the herbs you need to know about? What are the foods you need to know about? Before we dive into that, can we just take a step back for a second and talk broad level? Like, what is a migraine? What's really happening when you have a migraine? What are the different types of migraines? And then we'll dive into specific treatments.
Sure, this is my favorite topic. So I could talk about it for hours. So, what is a migraine? Well, I'll first start by saying it's not just a headache. A lot of people think a migraine is, oh, it's a bad headache and that's it. It's not. It's actually a neurologic condition. So, it's not just pain. There are all these other things that happen along with the migraine, and there are very specific criteria for migraine. So, the criteria, and I'll just share this really quickly. Number one, you have to have at least 5 attacks of one of these episodes, not just one time, but you have to have repetitive attacks for it to be called a migraine. And then also, the symptoms last anywhere from 4 hours to 72 hours. So it could be short on the shorter end, but it could last for days. And as you can see from my story, mine lasted for weeks, months, and years. So sometimes it's not just that episode, it can become chronic. So 5 episodes, 4 to 72 hours. And then there are very specific types of symptoms. So in terms of the diagnostic criteria, it tends to be one-sided, so unilateral pain. Sometimes it's just on the top of the head. Sometimes it's actually behind the eye. A lot of patients come in with eye pain and they feel like someone's like stabbing them in the eye. So it's that type of pain. The pain can also be like a throbbing type of sensation. So imagine like you feel the pain every time your heart's beating. It's kind of like that type of sensation. And usually the pain is moderate to severe and it stops you from doing the things you would normally do. So that's typically what a migraine is. But in addition to that, there are other symptoms people have to have during their attack. So light sensitivity or sound sensitivity, or nausea and vomiting. So if you have that constellation of symptoms 5 times, then it's called a migraine. So it's very, very specific, but that criteria, that definition doesn't encompass everything a migraine is. So you were asking earlier, like, what are the different types of migraine? There are many, many different categories of migraine. So the typical is just the headache, which is called migraine. It used to be called classic migraine or migraine without aura. Then you can get migraine with aura. And what that is basically people see visual disturbances before their headache. So they may see like zigzag flashing lights, what we call a scintillating scotoma. That's the fancy medical term for it. Some people may have tingling, which can be really scary, like tingling down their arm or weakness or numbness, and they may think that they're having a stroke. And then after those symptoms resolved, after the aura resolves, the aura is usually about 15 to 30 minutes, then the headache starts. So it's almost like a pre-migraine kind of thing to watch out for is the aura phase. So that's migraine with aura. Then there are all kinds of other migraines. So there's vestibular migraine, which can be really debilitating, where people have dizziness and vertigo. And it may come with the headache or without the headache. So some people may just have these episodes of vertigo with nothing else, like no headache, none of the other typical migraine symptoms. So that can be a little bit hard to diagnose. In kids, a lot of kids with migraine, by the way, a good percentage of children have migraine. Even infants can get migraine. It's kind of crazy to think that even babies can have migraine, but their migraines are totally different. A lot of those types of migraines have to do with gastrointestinal symptoms. So cramping, diarrhea, loose stools, bloating, belching, these are all potential symptoms of migraine in kids. So there's a lot. There's a lot there. I could go on and on and on, but those are kind of the most common types of migraine. And not everyone's migraine is the same. Like you may have a family member or friend with migraine, and their migraine may be totally different than your migraine.
We had a RUPA employee ask, when should you consider going to get diagnosed for migraines? It seems like we've got a lot of people who either are friends or family who feel like, okay, they get migraines once in a while, or maybe they get really bad headaches and they're not sure if they're migraines. What do you tell folks who are wondering if they could be having migraines?
Well, if you're having other symptoms, like for example, the flashing lights, the zigzag flashing lights, or the tingling numbness, or the sudden bouts of vertigo, definitely get it checked out. Go to see a doctor, whether it's an ophthalmologist, if it's visual, or if it's maybe more like vertigo, ENT doctor, or neurologist. Get it checked out first just to make sure it's not something else. Don't just assume it's a migraine. But if you have the pretty classic standard migraine symptoms that I first described, and you have a family member with migraine, it's probably migraine. So look out for some of those other types of symptoms that may be a little bit of a red flag. Get it checked out if you're not sure. Please don't try to just diagnose yourself, because there's a lot out there on the internet. There's a lot of great information out there, but there's also some information that may not necessarily be correct. So try not to diagnose yourself. And also, if you're really, like, let's say you've had just one episode, probably it's a migraine. But if you're having episodes that are really debilitating, like what I had, go see a doctor, because they can really help you get through it and help you with the pain. It can be disabling. Migraine can really, really be disabling. So they can help you with that.
Beautiful advice. So before we get into treatments, can we give everybody the one paragraph understanding of what do we think is actually causing migraines?
Wow, I wish I could put it in one paragraph. So it's a neurovascular condition that includes inflammation. It's a lot. So it's not just the nerves that are the problem, the blood vessels in the brain are the problem. There's constriction and dilation of blood vessels in the brain. And then by that constriction dilation, there are chemicals that are released that are inflammatory, they modulate pain. So it's a whole process. And we still don't fully understand it. That's the crazy thing. Migraine's been around, at least we know it's been reported 3,000, 4,000 years ago based in history. But we still, even with our modern technology, we still don't understand what exactly is happening in migraine. But it's the nerves, the blood vessels, and inflammation. And also mitochondrial dysfunction. I'll add that in there. That's definitely part of it as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a number of things are happening. And yet, there are some pretty simple things that people can look into, like nutrition, like supplements, like an elimination diet, that can really help with migraine. Can you talk about some of your favorites?
Yeah, I'll start with nutrition, because that's really what made the difference for me. So some people may be sensitive to certain foods, whether it be histamine, high histamine foods, or foods that are fermented with tyramine, which is an amino acid that can be found in fermented foods like certain cheeses, alcoholic drinks, etc. So you may be sensitive to certain things. I've even had a patient who she really didn't know what she was sensitive to. And then she said, I try to eat healthy. I go to Whole Foods all the time, and I buy food from Whole Foods. And I asked her, what are you buying at Whole Foods? And she said, I always get this one salad. And I forget exactly what was in the salad. But then she looked at the ingredients, and it had canola oil in it. And yes, she was buying it at Whole Foods, so she thought it was healthy, but it was the canola oil in the salad that she was getting that was triggering her migraine. So then she stopped it. She stopped eating that, and her migraines went away. So everyone is different. it was really, I was like, wow, that's great detective work on your part, like figuring out that that's what it was. But for other people, it could be gluten. I've definitely seen patients in whom gluten is the trigger, and then they eliminate gluten from their diet and they start to feel much better. For some people, it could be dairy. For some people, it could be processed foods, ultra processed foods in particular, high sugar content foods like simple sugars. So everyone is different in terms of their nutrition, what they may be sensitive to. So that's why sometimes doing food sensitivity testing can be so eye-opening, like it would really be helpful to uncover what exactly is going on.
I'm so curious for you, was part of it dairy? Because you said you were eating ice cream and pizza every day. Did you notice you were sensitive to dairy at all?
I think it was more so eating all the unhealthy fats. I think it was probably more that. I had a diet that was so rich in omega 6s that it was just ridiculous, like how much I was having every day. And I did also eat a lot of processed foods. Like I would just buy microwavable foods and eat that when I could, when I didn't have time to make something, which I rarely did back then. Now I cook all the time. But I think that was the main problem. And the other thing that when it comes to, this is kind of like a parallel to diet, is caffeine intake. It's a big, big double-edged sword when it comes to migraine. And so we'll start with, let's say somebody has a lot of caffeine in their diet, like I did. So not only was I having like pizza, ice cream, and Diet Coke, I was having all these other caffeinated beverages. I cringe to think this too. Like I was having 10 to 12 caffeinated beverages a day, 10 to 12. And caffeine helps to regulate blood vessel size. So it works on adenosine receptors. And when you have too much caffeine, your receptors just don't respond as much, and you keep needing more and more and more caffeine to have the same constriction or effect. So I just had crazy amounts of caffeine upregulation in my system probably back then. And so when I cut out the caffeine, it started to become better. My migraines improved a lot also. But if you don't normally have caffeine in your diet, let's say you're not a big coffee drinker or tea drinker, and in that case, your adenosine receptors are going to be more responsive to caffeine. And you can, in that case, you can actually use a tiny dose of caffeine to help manage your symptoms of migraine. So it can go both ways. It all depends on what your baseline intake of caffeine is. And actually, a lot of the over the counter migraine medications, like Excedrin migraine, it has caffeine in it. And there's a reason for that because the caffeine helps to constrict blood vessels and prevent the dilation that causes the pain in a lot of migraine patients. So it can go both ways.
This is so good to know. Okay, as someone who was drinking so many caffeinated beverages per day, I need you to share your tips. How did you handle reducing your caffeine? Like, it can be pretty hard to reduce your caffeine intake for a lot of people.
It can be. And actually, one of my colleagues told me to go cold turkey. Like he just said, why don't you just stop? And I said, I don't think I can do that. Not so much for alertness, but just I would get a really bad, like a caffeine withdrawal headache, which is a different type of headache than migraine, but it can be really, really bad, like a caffeine withdrawal headache. So what I did was, number one, I cut out the sodas and I replaced it with kombucha, which we'll talk about in a second. But that was kind of like I swapped one thing out for the other because it was still a little fizzy and it had some caffeine in it, but it had less caffeine. And then also what I did was I gradually decreased it by half a cup a week. So that's what I typically recommend. Do not go cold turkey. Your brain will not like it. Your body will not like it. But if you slowly wean yourself down, you'll get there in just a couple of months. You'll get down to like, I typically tell my patients, you don't have to eliminate caffeine altogether, but have maybe 1 or 1.5 cups a day instead of like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 cups a day. So you can do it that way. But the thing with the kombucha is I didn't even realize how much caffeine it had. So when I swapped it out for the soda for the kombucha, I thought, oh, okay, I'm having a probiotic drink. It's healthy. It's got less caffeine. So I was like drinking like 3 kombuchas a day or 4 sometimes, which is really bad. And basically, then one day I decided, I'm going to look at the label and see exactly how much caffeine it has. So it actually has quite a bit of caffeine. And I realized, okay, I just swapped out one thing for another. Maybe it's a little healthier because it has some probiotics in it. But then what I ended up doing was I switched to an apple cider vinegar fizzy drink, which I love and has no caffeine in it. And then when I do want a little bit of caffeine, now I do turn to green tea, which has a little bit of caffeine. It has about 12 to 24 milligrams of caffeine versus like 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine that a lot of the other drinks have. So look at the labels. That's the other thing I learned in this is look at the labels and really kind of calculate your caffeine intake every day.
That's smart to do an audit. People might be shocked.
Yes, I was shocked. I was really shocked.
Yeah, there's a lot of caffeine hidden in drinks that we don't even know about. Okay, hold on. I want to go back to something you said earlier. So you recommended that people consider if they could have food sensitivities or be sensitive to certain foods. What's the testing you'd recommend if somebody wanted to do a test to help them figure it out rather than maybe doing a migraine diary, which is what kind of used to be recommended? What do you reach for?
I still start with that's a great idea, doing the migraine diary and just keeping track like for a week or two of what foods you're having and whether you had a headache on certain days or not. So that's one way to do it. There are also apps that you can use. There's some great apps that you can track your food intake with relation to your migraine. So there's an app called Migraine Buddy that's really popular. I think millions of people have downloaded it at this point, but that can help you track your diet. I typically start with an elimination diet for most people. And I typically have them do it for 3 weeks. Some patients who have chronic migraine or severe migraine, even up to 3 months, I'll have them do an elimination diet. And if that doesn't help to identify what the problem may be, and then after the elimination diet, I have them reintroduce foods one at a time, like every week, a different food group to see whether their symptoms get exacerbated. But if that's not enough to figure out what's going on, then I do the food sensitivity testing. But I find that because it is a little expensive for some patients, they would prefer to start with something that's more cost efficient. And then we can go to that testing later if necessary.
So when you say food sensitivity diet, there's actually tons of different ways you can do this. And I'm curious how you do it. Like, what foods would you have clients eliminate? And I think equally as important, what foods were you making sure they did include? Because I think so many times when we talk to people about elimination diet, they think, I can't have these 40 things. And then they feel very deprived. But it seems like you have a beautiful way of doing it while still nourishing people.
Yeah, you don't want to make them feel guilty also about enjoying some of the foods that they love. But I tell them, like, this is just an experiment to try to get you back on track. It's not forever. So you need to try to eliminate certain types of foods. So we work on the ultra processed foods, number one. We work on the simple sugars. And again, like omega-6 type foods, like really those that are high in omega-6s. And if they may have other symptoms, then I may also ask them to eliminate gluten and dairy. But that's a lot. Like you were saying, that's a lot of things to eliminate all at once. So it's not a traditional elimination diet, but it's like a sad food elimination diet. So eliminate foods that are the standard American diet, typical foods, and then go from there. And then in terms of reintroduction, again, I tell them to do it very slowly. And the first day that they're going to reintroduce the food, just have a little bit of it. And then maybe the next day, have a little bit more. And then by the 7th day of that week, I have them have a lot of that food to really gauge and see if their body's going to react to it or not.
Gotcha. So what is someone eating? Because they're probably thinking, wait, I had a diet like you where I eat pizza and ice cream. What the heck would I be eating?
Yeah, so I always try to steer them towards a green smoothie. I say, okay, even if you can't do the full elimination diet, if you can't do that, I understand, but do one thing for me. Have a green smoothie every morning. And in that green smoothie, I want you to pack in about 4 to 5 cups of greens and your preference, whether it's kale, spinach, collard greens, etc. Pack it in because you're getting all those amazing B vitamins and magnesium and all those amazing nutrients, vitamin A. And then you're going to add some seeds to it, like chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds for some omegas. And then you're going to add berries, great for antioxidants and also for their phytonutrients. And your milk of choice, preferably not dairy, cow's milk, but preferably a plant-based milk. And then if you want to add some protein powder, mix it up and have that during your breakfast every morning and see how you feel after a week or two. And when people start to have that, first of all, they initially think it's like so overwhelming to try to do something like that, but then they realize it's not so hard. So I think after getting that first obstacle of, I can't do that, how am I going to get all those nutrients in? You can do it. It's really not that difficult. And once they get past that, then they realize, oh, and then I can experiment with trying out different types of whatever fruits and vegetables I'm putting in there and make it taste the way I want it that appeals to my taste buds. So they experiment with it a little bit, and then they make it part of their routine. And then in that process, hopefully they've eliminated some of those other sad foods that they would normally be eating for breakfast, whether it's baked goods like croissants and danishes and donuts and things like that. So this is kind of like a substitute for all of that. And I think with doing that, I think that's the start for somebody who's a little bit hesitant or resistant to making dietary changes. Add something rather than take everything away.
We love that. The Root Cause Medicine podcast, we talk a lot about nutrition by addition. So, like, what can you add? So, I'm so thrilled to hear you are telling your patients this. Now, you mentioned the ultra processed foods being high in omega 6s. And I think for a functional medicine doc, it makes sense why that is maybe linked to inflammation or chronic conditions. But for someone at home who isn't familiar with sort of that biochemical pathway, can you talk about why you care about omega 6s and why you talk to your patients about omega 6, omega 3 balance?
Sure. So there are different types of omegas. So there's threes that we hear about, sixes. There's also fives and sevens and nines. We don't hear as much about those. But in terms of the threes and sixes, it's kind of like a balance. We do need both threes and sixes. Those are essential fatty acids that our body needs, meaning that our bodies can't make them. So we need to get them externally, either from diet or from supplements. In general, omega 6s, for example, linoleic acid, gets converted as it gets processed by the body, gets converted into a pro-inflammatory pathway. And omega 3s, on the other hand, which are ALA, alpha linolenic acid, DHA, and EPA, they tend to be more anti-inflammatory. So again, if you think about it like a balance, like you have the sixes that are pro-inflammatory, the threes that are anti-inflammatory, you want to try to balance them out. Of course, you don't want to eliminate the sixes completely because yes, our body does need them for proper metabolism, for our cell membranes, etc. But you want to balance it out. So it's thought that our ancestors had a more balanced omega 6 to 3 ratio than most people do in today's modern world. So it was thought that our ancestors had like a 4-to-1 ratio of 6 to 3. But nowadays, a lot of people, especially people on a Western diet, like a SAD diet, tend to have really high ratios of 15-to-1 or 30-to-1 or even 50-to-1. So you really want to just balance it out by including more omega-3s and decreasing your amount of omega-6s. Now, other foods also have both omega-3s and 6s. For example, nuts. There are plenty of different types of nuts that have both 3s and 6s. So again, you don't want to eliminate the 6s completely, but you just want to have a good ratio or strive for a good ratio.
I agree with you. It's like you look in nature and you see 6 and 3 occurring in many foods together. But it sounds like there are some foods that are just artificially kind of really high in omega 6s. What are some of those foods that if we mention them might sound familiar to people at home?
Yeah, so a lot of deep fried foods, it really depends on the oil that they're fried in, but unfortunately, most of the oils are high omega 6 oils, like canola oil, like safflower oil. I mean, it's not all just good or bad, and we can have some safflower oil or sunflower oil, but they are rich in omega 6s. So, but if it's deep fried foods, a lot of the baked goods that I was mentioning earlier, particularly goods made with margarine, are going to be high in omega 6s. So rather try to swap out your fats for healthier types of fats, especially if you're cooking. Maybe choose healthier oils to cook with, whether it's olive oil or avocado oil or coconut oil. Like there are options that you can choose that are going to be higher in healthier omegas rather than unhealthy omegas.
This sounds like a reason to start making your own baked goods too. Like this might be a reason where you can choose the oil that you put in a croissant that you eat in the morning or a muffin that you eat in the morning versus one that you grab from the store may not have the oils that you want in it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a great tip is to, if you can, if you have the time, to cook yourself because then you know what you're putting in there. That's the most important thing. You know what ingredients you're choosing versus even if you go out to a restaurant, even though you're reading, what's on the menu, you don't really know exactly what they're putting in the dish. And so it just allows you to have better control, especially if you're struggling with a health problem, like a chronic health problem like migraine. You want to really, for a period of time, know exactly what you're putting into your body. It really makes a big difference.
I love that. All right, let's tie a bow on the food sensitivity and migraine topic. I want to know from you, how do you talk to your clients about doing blood testing for food sensitivities if it comes to that point? Because you said you usually do food elimination first. Are you someone who's saying like, go do Everlywell, it doesn't matter where you get your test, or are you using specific types of food sensitivity testing in your practice?
So I'm a little bit limited because I practice in New York State. And New York State has very strict guidelines about functional medicine testing. So it's really challenging to practice as a functional medicine practitioner here. So I use a lab called Vibrant America. and they're licensed in New York State. The issue is that patients, if they need a blood draw, they can't get their blood drawn in New York State. It's really ridiculous. Like they have to cross state lines to have the phlebotomy done. Like they have to go to Connecticut or New Jersey, which is really, really ridiculous. But other tests, some of the tests, food sensitivity test is a blood test, but other tests may be like a dried spot urine test, which you can do anywhere. And you kind of have to attest that you're in New York State when you do it, but how are they ever going to know? How are they ever going to check? So off the record, there are ways to get around that.
So I guess from you, the biomarkers you would focus on would be something like IgG, IgA, IgE antibodies to foods.
I typically get IgG and sometimes IgA. IgE, I typically don't order for migraine because it's more of like a chronic type of issue, not just an acute allergic type of response that I'm looking for.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you. This will help the folks at home who are writing down their next steps that they need to chat with their doctor about.
And since we're talking about functional medicine testing, I also want to share with you there's an emerging area of research in migraine that has to do with the gut and gut dysbiosis in migraine. And when I saw this, published, I was so excited because I was like, yes, finally, functional medicine is making it to like mainstream or getting a foothold in mainstream. But of course, they call it something different. They don't call it leaky gut. They call it increased intestinal permeability, which is fine. It's the same thing essentially. But basically, when my patients, if I start off with an elimination diet and making some diet and lifestyle changes and they're not getting better, then I will move to both food sensitivity testing and stool analysis. And I look for gut dysbiosis. I look for some of the other markers of inflammation, and it really has been helpful. And then I talk to patients about healing their gut, which can really make a big, big difference.
Do you have a case study for someone at home where you can give an example? Because they might be thinking, man, this seems too good to be true. Could it really be possible that if I have really bad migraines and I just heal my gut or I just change what I eat, it could work? Like, do you have a client who maybe had leaky gut where you did a protocol with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is a child. He was 16 and he was really crippled by migraine. And it was to the point where this poor child, like, he couldn't go to school because his headaches were so severe. And his mother had taken him everywhere. Like, again, all the local pediatric neurologists who were excellent in New York City, and they just gave him medication after medication after medication. I mean, this poor kid was on like 10 different migraine medications and Botox and a CGRP injection. It was really unfortunate. So, anyway, she was looking for another solution. So, she found me and I went through his diet, and he wasn't eating that much because he had a lot of nausea and vomiting associated with his migraines. He had lost a lot of weight, but he was also eating basically like the SAD diet. When he would eat, he was eating a lot of chips and fries and foods with advanced glycation end products or AGEs. So he was eating just a lot of processed foods. So we started with the elimination diet. It was a little tricky with him because I didn't want him to lose too much weight, but he did that for a while and he felt a little bit better, but he wasn't fully better. So then we ended up doing the stool analysis, and then lo and behold, he had leaky gut. And so we really worked hard on improving that. And it was a long, long process, but it made a big difference. Like I would say after the third month or so, it's really started to make a big difference. So it worked. And, that's one case study, but everyone is different. And so it's really important for if anyone's listening to this and they have migraine and they haven't gotten the solutions that they're looking for, find a provider who is willing to explore these avenues with you. The root cause, where is it coming from? Is it gut dysbiosis? Is it a food sensitivity? Maybe it's a toxin. Maybe it's an environmental exposure. So that's another route to explore if you have chronic migraine. Like, what is triggering it? And really, you have to feel comfortable with your provider. I think that's the most important thing.
Everybody's ears just perked up when you said toxins. I'm curious, what type of toxins do you find useful to test for?
Yeah. So again, my testing is very limited. So I'm really kind of stuck. And sometimes I have to send my patients out of state to get the testing done. But I look for things like mercury. I look for sometimes zinc toxicity, minerals that our body may need, but that are in excess. And then for myself, like for example, I mentioned when I was in the worst part of my migraine, I was in the middle of a reconstruction project in our home. So there were so many chemicals in the air, so many like toxins, fumes in the air. And that was triggering a lot of my symptoms, I think, in addition to the food. But I think that was kind of a secondary trigger for what was going on.
I'm curious. We had a couple people from Rupo write in to say, I get migraines and I'm sensitive to smells. Why am I triggered by exposure to certain chemicals? How do you explain that to your clients?
Yeah, so that's not uncommon, first of all. A lot of people with migraine are sensitive to particular smells. The way I like to explain it is if someone has migraine, remember it's a neurologic condition, it's not just a headache. Your brain is wired to be sensitive to any kind of stimulus that normal people probably would not be picking up on. So whether it's a certain light, a certain flickering light, many of us have probably gone into a store where there's overhead fluorescence and it's flickering. Like for people with migraine, they're really bothered by that. Like that light is really, really, it triggers pain, it triggers discomfort. And so smells are very similar. So I know for myself, even though I may not be having a migraine, if somebody walks by me and they're wearing a lot of perfume or cologne, that is a trigger for me. Like I cannot take strong smells. And so it's not uncommon for your brain just to not to like noxious stimuli. And I shouldn't say noxious, but again, stimuli that most people would not be bothered by. And this also can extend to certain sounds, so certain pitches may be really bothersome. So for example, if someone's having a migraine, you may not like to have the TV on relatively loud because it's really bothersome to you, or the car radio on. Or a lot of people don't go to concerts if they have migraine because they're just so sensitive to loud sounds and certain pitches or tones. And then also touch. This is another one that's really interesting, is if something just kind of rubs against you, normal person probably wouldn't think twice about that, but people who have migraine are super sensitive. Their skin is very sensitive to different temperatures, even fabrics they may be sensitive to. So it's just part of your brain being wired in a certain way to be hypersensitive.
Do you have tips for people to help them maybe react less to stimuli in the environment? And do you see this get better when you treat migraine naturally? Do you see people get a little bit more resilient to these stimuli?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one way to really almost desensitize your brain to a lot of these stimuli is to try to activate your vagus nerve. And it can be really, really powerful because the vagus nerve, and I'll just take a step back and explain. So within our nervous system, we have the autonomic nervous system, which is a balance between the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic. And the sympathetic is more like the fight or flight response. If you have to kind of get up and go, that's what's responsible for that. It's responsible for our heart rate speeding up or breathing speeding up. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest aspect of our nervous system, which helps us to calm down. And the vagus nerve is the major nerve in the body that is responsible for our rest and digest system. It has many branches. It goes to the heart, it goes to the brain, and then, well, it comes from the brain, but also it goes to our digestive system as well. So if you're super sensitive to certain stimuli, what I typically recommend for my patients is they try to activate their vagus nerve. So by doing things like deep breathing, relaxation exercises, sometimes even massage, laughing, that can actually stimulate the vagus nerve. It's really incredible how we can modulate our nervous system by simple things that we do. And so when you feel yourself, okay, I feel my migraines like coming on, try to take some deep breaths, maybe do a little bit of self massage and maybe some acupressure, which I love, acupressure points that can really get your body into more of a rest and digest mode rather than to be on the fight or flight mode.
This is great advice. I'm curious. Our last question we had was, and we didn't even get into herbs yet. Guys at home, this is going to be a two-part episode because I want to take the few extra minutes to go into migraines, but then we have this whole other specialty of yours that we're going to dive into, which is eye health. I'm so glad you're here for so long to record today. It's so great. But we had a couple people ask, like, what can I do to shorten these migraine episodes? So maybe I didn't catch it in time to prevent it. Are there some interventions that we know might help reduce the amount of time someone has a migraine for?
Yeah, so absolutely. The supplements I mentioned earlier, magnesium, riboflavin, they have been shown in clinical studies to help reduce the frequency and severity of migraines. So definitely include those as part of your regimen. Try to eat foods that are also rich in those two nutrients. And then in terms of other things like botanicals, for example, herbs. So there's a compound called feverfew, which is nature's natural anti-inflammatory. So that's also been shown to help reduce the frequency and severity of headaches. And then also rosemary and peppermint, which are two natural compounds that I love. You can include them as if you're cooking. include a little bit of, maybe a drop of peppermint oil or rosemary extract or some of the, I guess, twigs in your cooking. And also, you can use them as essential oils as well. So I love using a combination of these things, natural compounds, natural products, as part of your daily life to help your body fight inflammation. So these are all anti-inflammatories. Another big one is curcumin, which comes from the spice turmeric. So that's also been shown to help reduce inflammation throughout the body, but it's like specific to migraine, it's been shown to help with migraine as well. So there's a lot of different things you can turn to that have scientific evidence behind them.
It's such good news. It sounds like what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's probably good to do a lot of this preventatively rather than just relying on a natural remedy to try to shorten a migraine once it's already begun. Is that true?
Yes, especially if you're prone to migraine often. If you're getting a migraine, again, like once every 6 months, once every year, you don't necessarily have to do anything preventatively. But if you're getting migraine regularly, like a couple of times a month, you should absolutely consider doing some of these interventions. And the supplementation is number one on the list in my mind. Many people, we'll talk a little bit about magnesium. We know that magnesium is so important for our bodily functions. It's involved in over 600 enzymatic processes, but it's also really crucial for mitochondrial health and healthy energy production. And so many people with migraine are magnesium deficient. We know that. And so you want to, especially if you're prone to frequent migraines, you want to boost your levels of magnesium. So eat magnesium rich foods, but also take the supplement. Take a magnesium supplement or take a supplement that's curated for migraine. I actually have one that I developed that has magnesium plus B2 plus feverfew and a couple of other things. But the magnesium helps to calm your nerves and blood vessels. It helps to reduce inflammation, and it really can make a big, big difference. In addition to the supplement, you can also do magnesium as an oil. You can rub it over your body, use it topically. Don't get it into your eyes though, because it will really sting. Or you can even do like magnesium salts, like soaking in magnesium can really help to relax your nerves and muscles if you're prone to migraine. If you're taking it as a supplement, I'll also add this. There are different formulations of magnesium. There are so many different formulations. Some are magnesium salts, which means that they're bound to a salt molecule, like, for example, oxide or citrate or sulfate. Others are bound to other types of molecules, like amino acids, for example. Those are called chelated forms of magnesium. So if you have migraine, you want to take a chelated form, because the chelated forms are more likely to cross the blood-brain barrier, get into your brain, and help to actually deal with the nerves that are irritated and inflamed in migraine. So look for a chelated form. For example, magnesium glycinate is a chelated form, magnesium L-threonate, and also magnesium malate. These are the chelated forms that I would suggest for migraine.
This is an amazing episode. We are going to take a break, everybody who's listening at home, and round out the migraine episode with just giving Dr. Rani a minute to kind of give everyone the takeaway she wants to have from migraine. But stay tuned, because part 2 is going to come out and we're going to talk about eye health. Dr. Rani, we just gave people so much information. And for the person at home or the parent at home who has a kid with migraines who's thinking, okay, I just learned so much. What should my next step be? What do you tell people?
I would say be your own health advocate. Take things into your own hands to the extent that you can. The things that are under your control, your nutrition. What are you putting in your mouth every day? Make healthy choices. Number 2, take a supplement. And number 3, think about some of the lifestyle strategies that we briefly touched on, like promoting your vagus nerve, like doing things to put yourself into a more relaxed state. And that will really move the needle. I think like it will make such a huge impact on your pain and help you to get back to your daily activities, because migraine can be so debilitating.
Thank you so much. Amazing. We are going to see you in part 2. Dr. Rani, welcome back for part 2 of our migraines and eye health segment on the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I am thrilled. Today, I want to pick your brain. I have heard you say on other interviews that there are about 30 nutrients we need to keep our eyes healthy. And surprisingly, some of them cannot be found in a standard multivitamin. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they think about nutrition for eye health, they think immediately, oh, carrots, beta carotene, that's all I need. But I want to share something with you. So I wanted to share my friend here, the eyeball, and show you why is it that we need 30 nutrients to keep our eyes healthy. Well, when we think about the eye, most people just think about like the very front part of the eye, the white part, the cornea here, and then the colored part, which is the iris. But if you look inside the eye, there is so much else going on inside the eye. And I hope I don't drop everything here, but again, this is the cornea, this is the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. Behind that is the lens, which helps us to focus. Behind that is the vitreous, which is the jelly in the back of the eye. This is plastic, but normally it's like a jelly consistency. And then you have your retina, the nerves, the optic nerve, the blood vessels, etc. So there's a lot inside the eye. There are over 40 parts to the eyeball. And so to nourish all of those 40 parts, we need a lot of nutrients. So that's why I really believe strongly that we need to get those 30 nutrients in to really give full support to our vision and not just rely on one food, one nutrient. We need 30 nutrients from 40 different foods. And the good news is a lot of these foods that I share in my book, Beyond Carrots, a lot of these foods have many nutrients. So I call them therapeutic foods because they're so rich in not just one nutrient, but multiple nutrients. So if you rotate through a lot of the foods that I talk about in the book, you will be providing your eyes with the full spectrum of what they need. And unfortunately, the generic multivitamin doesn't have all of those nutrients. It may have a lot of them. It may have, for example, the full spectrum of B vitamins and vitamins A and C and D and some of the minerals, but it's not going to have a couple of the really important nutrient classes that the eye needs. And we can talk about that if you want, or we can save it for later.
Yeah, I would love to dive into what's missing. And before we dive into that, I think it's important to mention that we're not saying to the people at home, don't take a multi. It sounds like what we're saying is a multivitamin is recommended for most people, can be really beneficial. But there are some things over and above the multi that you're going to need if you really want to keep your eyes healthy long term.
Absolutely. Yes. No, that's exactly what I'm saying is it's not that you're going to toss your multi. No, that's not the message here. The message here is look at the label and see what your multi has in it. And if your multi doesn't have everything that it should have for eye health, why not take a multi that does? Because then you're kind of, I hate to say it this way, but taking care of two birds with one stone, right? You're taking your multi for your general health, but you're also supporting your eyes with the multi and the extra nutrients that your eyes need.
Okay, give us the list, Dr. Rani. And I'm going to literally look at my multivitamin while you tell me this because I want to know what are some of the nutrients I should look for to see if my multi has enough.
Yes. So I would say the top category would be the macular carotenoids. And so the macular carotenoids are cousins to like vitamin A, which is also in the carotenoid class, cousins to beta carotene, but there are very specific nutrients. And there's three of them. There's lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin. I know they're kind of hard to pronounce, hard to remember, but they go by the macular carotenoids. And why they're so important is that, and I'll pull out my eye model to show you again. Back here is the retina, the orange. It's really transparent, but it looks orange because of the blood vessels underneath it. And you see this yellow spot right here. This is the macula in the back, or this represents the macula in the back of the eye. And this is what's responsible for our 20/20 vision. So our high resolution, crystal clear vision comes from this area here. And this area is really susceptible to damage. It's really susceptible to free radicals and oxidative stress and UV light and also blue light. And so the way our bodies are designed, our eyes designed to protect against that damage is by having the macular carotenoids. It's really amazing how this whole system developed, but the body developed a way to absorb these nutrients from foods because we can't make these nutrients ourselves. The three macular carotenoids get deposited right here. And that's why it looks yellow because the carotenoids are yellow in color. So anyway, these nutrients, these three nutrients act like a shield. They act like our internal blue blockers, like our internal sunglasses. So make sure your multi has at least lutein, if not all three of the macular carotenoids in it. Because you do need, again, our bodies can't make lutein. We need to get it from foods or take it in a supplement form. And we're also just not getting enough. And I'll share this with you also. It's estimated that we need about 6.5 to 20 milligrams of lutein a day. And most people, unfortunately, most people on a Western style diet are only getting about 1 to 2 milligrams of lutein a day. So there's a huge gap between what we need and what we're actually getting. So yes, you can increase your dietary intake, but also supplement to make sure your eyes are getting that, especially with the amount of time we spend on screens every day with all the blue light that we're exposed to. We need to take lutein as a form of our internal protection against blue light.
Wow. So let me back up a second. Where would you get these top three sources of the macular carotenoids in the diet? Like, do they naturally occur in certain foods?
Actually, they're pretty easy to get from your diet, but there's some foods that are really high in these nutrients. So I'll point out what they are. They're the leafy greens. And you may have heard that eat your leafy greens for so many different reasons. But for eye health in particular, leafy greens like kale is top in terms of the concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin. Spinach, collard greens, dandelion greens, like whatever greens you like. Bok choy, for example, is another one, will have high concentrations of lutein and zeaxanthin. But in addition to that, let's say you're not a big fan of leafy greens, or maybe you're sensitive to oxalates and you can't have leafy greens. It's okay because there's actually a lot of other foods that will provide you with the macular carotenoids. So anything that is orange or yellow in color typically will be rich in the macular carotenoids. So for example, bell peppers that are orange or yellow will provide you with high levels of these nutrients. So if you're choosing to cook with bell peppers or eat bell peppers, make sure you're not getting the green ones. Make sure you're including the orange and yellow, and even red ones are better than the green ones, unfortunately. So I know the green ones are the easiest to get. They're the most available. They're slightly cheaper, but try to look for those yellow and orange ones. Also, egg yolk. Egg yolk is a great source of the macular carotenoids. So that beautiful like orange, yellow color of the egg yolk, a lot of people throw the yolks away, but I tell them don't do that because that's where the gold is. Literally, that's where you're going to find the highest concentration of the macular carotenoids. And also other yellow and orange foods. So for example, corn. The yellow of the corn is because of these pigments. And the scientific name of corn is actually zea mays, which is where the word zeaxanthin came from. So if you have corn, preferably non-GMO corn, but corn is a great source, as well as there's some fruits as well, like peaches, nectarines, and even some herbs. Like this is really interesting, like cilantro and parsley have really high levels of these nutrients as well. So lots of places to get them.
Wow, this is so cool. I actually didn't know about the orange color of these nutrients having to do with the sort of orange yellowish color we see of the macula. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's beautiful how nature has devised this way for us to protect our eyes. And I also want to just add something. A lot of people think all orange foods have lutein zeaxanthin. They don't, unfortunately. For example, like carrots, the reason why they're orange is because of the beta-carotene, not because of lutein and zeaxanthin. So you do have to think ahead a little bit. Like also pumpkin squash, they don't have a lot of lutein zeaxanthin. They do have beta-carotene though. So have like different types of orange foods in your diet to make sure you're getting enough of these pigments and the beta carotene that your eyes need also.
Yeah, tell us about beta carotene because it sounds like your book is called Beyond Carrots, which means it sounds like carrots do matter, but they're not the full story. So, do carrots actually help with eye health?
They do. And actually, Kate, do you know where that whole urban legend myth came from about carrots and eye health? I love sharing this story. So, it actually goes, it's a little bit of some history here, a history lesson. It goes back to World War II. And what was happening during World War II is that the German Nazi planes were coming in and they were bombing Great Britain in the middle of the night. So the planes would come in, they would drop their bombs on British cities. And then the British developed a way to target these planes and shoot them down. And so the Germans were wondering, like, how are the British able to see our planes in the middle of night and shoot them down? And we're losing all these fighter pilots. And so the British started spreading this myth, like, oh, our pilots are all eating carrots. And it's because they're eating so many carrots that they have excellent night vision. And that's how they're able to shoot down your planes. And so they started spreading this myth. I shouldn't say it's a myth, it's like partially a myth. And so people everywhere around the world started eating carrots. So the German pilots started eating carrots. All the other military people started eating carrots. Everyone was growing carrots and eating carrots, and then there was a carrot surplus. But the truth is, this is what really happened, is that the British had developed radar technology, which is at that time, it was like high tech. They were able to detect the planes and shoot them down, but they didn't want the Germans to know that. So they spread this myth about the carrots. And so that's why, we're all told growing up, eat your carrots, it'll give you good eyesight. And yes, it's true. We do need beta carotene for healthy eyes. We need it for our retinas to function. Without beta carotene, we would have, or vitamin A, we would have night blindness and dry eye. but it's not all you need. Again, this is something that I really talk about in the book is carrots are like the tip of the iceberg. Beta carotene is the tip of the iceberg because we have to nourish not just the retina, we need to nourish the entire eye. And so, yeah, that's where the whole kind of concept about carrots came from. It's really interesting that it still persists even to this day, like from the 1940s.
Yeah, I had no idea. That is fascinating. So you're saying there's way more nutrients. Like we've talked about a few, beta carotene, lutein, right? But there's you listed 30 in your book, and then you talked about 40 foods. So can we talk about some other surprising nutrients that people may not know they should be paying attention to if they really care about their eye health?
Yeah, absolutely. So another big class is the class of bioflavonoids. And these are pigments. Most of them are pigments or compounds that come from plants. And they protect the plant from disease, from infection or oxidative stress or inflammation. So when we ingest foods that have these bioflavonoids, we also get some of those benefits. They're really powerful antioxidants. And studies have shown that a lot of these bioflavonoids can protect the eye as well. They can protect retinal cells, they can protect the lens, etc. So there's lots of different bioflavonoids in nature. There's over, I think, 4,000 different bioflavonoids, but there are certain ones that are especially useful for eye health. So I'll just go through what some of them are. So quercetin is one of them. We know that it has a lot of benefits for our immune system, but it can also benefit eye health. So you were asking before, what else should you look for in a multivitamin? So maybe look for bioflavonoids in your multivitamin and specifically look for quercetin as one of those ingredients that are added to the multivitamin. Also, berry extracts. So berries, and I actually just did a post about this today. I posted an Instagram reel about this. The benefits of dark berries, particularly like blackberries, blueberries, or depending on where you live, like bilberries, elderberries, mackey berry. These berries are really deeply pigmented. They're either blue or black or purple in color. And they're that color because of the bioflavonoids that are in them. And there are specific bioflavonoids called anthocyanins that, again, are found in these pigmented berries that if you eat them, you also get the benefits. And there's research to show that anthocyanins can be beneficial for eye health. And it's not just berries that have them, also like any kind of deeply pigmented food. For example, the skin of eggplant, like the black skin of eggplant, will have anthocyanins, and there are other foods as well that have them. So, but berries are kind of the example I always like to share because people ask, what can I have on a daily basis? And I always tell them, have your leafy greens and have your berries, and you'll get some of those great plant powered pigments that will protect your eyes.
This is making more sense why the smoothie you talked about in the migraine episode contains the greens and the berries. For someone who may not have listened to the migraines episode and they're just tuning into this one to hear about eye health, can you refresh our memory? What do you tell people to put in their morning smoothie to really boost their intake of important nutrients?
Yeah, this is a great way to get pretty much all your nutritional needs for your eyes and your brain all in one go. So, super simple. The green smoothie should have about 4 to 5 cups of your favorite leafy green. So, just pack it in there, like loosely packed, and then add 1 cup of berries. So, berries of your choice. Preferably mix it up sometimes, make sure you're getting the darker ones. But even if you have like strawberries, raspberries, there are all kinds of berries on the market now. Even goji berries you can add to smoothies to add a little bit of extra punch. But 1 cup of berries. And then you're going to add your omega 3s, which are the seeds, like, for example, chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. Not only will they give you your omegas, they're rich in fiber. They have all kinds of other nutrients as well. So, again, they cover a lot of the nutrients that are important for eye health. So, 1 to 2 tablespoons of seeds. And then you're going to add your milk of choice, or whatever plant milk you like, or any other type of milk. And then I also like to add some protein powder to my smoothie. So, you blend it all up, and you have that as your morning breakfast or part of your morning breakfast. And in that, whether you drink like 8 ounces, 16 ounces, you will get that nutrient protein packed smoothie will cover you for the rest of the day. So I typically tell my patients, if you're looking to include some of these foods for your eye health, strive for 5 cups of fruits and veggies a day. And in that one meal, you can get easily your 5 cups all together in that one meal. So it's pretty simple to do.
That's a good point. 4 cups of leafy greens, 1 cup of berries, you're covered.
You're covered. And it'll be great not only for your eyes, but for your migraine too. So yeah, try it out.
Yeah. Sounds delicious as well to me. Because you can throw in spices too. You could do like a vanilla protein powder with cinnamon.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I taught at my daughter's school a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me to come in and teach their health class, like the seniors who are graduating soon, like their health class. So I taught like 125 seniors that day in different classes. And so I gave them a very short talk on eye health and some of the nutrients they need. And then we made the smoothie, and they loved it. They had so much fun throwing things together. And it was interesting. Each group decided, oh, I want to add this. So some groups added some apple slices in there. Other groups added vanilla extract. There was one group that said, hey, can we put some dates in there? And so I said, sure, why not? So they grabbed some delicious dates and they pitted them, they put them in there. And it was probably the best smoothie I've had was when they added the dates to the leafy greens and the berries and everything else. So I highly recommend experimenting. Like, let's say you're not a big fan of leafy greens and maybe the bitterness of it doesn't really appeal to you. You can add things and experiment and play around and find something that's going to suit your palate. So it doesn't have to be like this exact recipe. You can really adjust it to your own needs.
That is brilliant. Now, tell me, what did you tell these teenagers to get them to care about their eye health? And I'm thinking, I mean, I've heard you quote some statistics about the incidence of some pretty serious eye disorders in our society versus other societies. But like, why is this a topic that people should care about, even if maybe they're in their 20s or 30s and they feel like their vision's fine?
Yeah. So I got them with a hook, which is how much time do you spend on screens every day? And I just asked them the question. Think about it. Like, how much time are you on your computer, your phone, your tablet, watching television, watching Netflix? And most of them said over 10 hours a day. And that's about the average. The average adult spends over 10 hours a day in front of a screen. So then I asked them to think about, okay, well, how do you think that screen time is impacting your eyes? And what could it potentially do to your eyes? Or have you had eye strain? Are you someone who's suffered eye strain? And almost, I would say, like 2/3 of the class raised their hand, like they've had eye strain before, especially during the pandemic when they were doing school on Zoom. So they've experienced it. So they know what too much screen time, the impact of it can be on their eyes. So they were curious, like, what can we do to help to alleviate some of this? And then the next thing I brought up was, well, how many of you have been told to wear blue blockers, to get blue blocking glasses for your eye strain? And a good number of them raised their hands. And then I gave them my whole talk about blue blocking glasses and how most blue blockers, you see them advertised on TV or just even like on the internet all the time. Most blue blockers only block about 10 to 30% of the blue light that's coming from your screen. Only 10 to 30%. So there's a better way to block that blue light, and it's to have these macular carotenoids in your diet. So there's no research that shows that blue blocking glasses actually block the blue light and they can help with eye strain, but there is lots of research. And there was a study just published about screen time and kids and eye strain and using these macular carotenoids as a way to protect against eye strain from screens. So there is published data. And when I said that, they were like, oh, okay, we had no idea that nutrition could help with our eye strain and be a substitute for blue blocking glasses. So that's what got them interested. And I do think that when you think about it like your daily life, I mean, you think about the impact of what the potential impact of all this screen time is doing to us, or maybe it's interfering with your sleep, all the potential negative health impacts of screen time, it really drives it home. And it really kind of makes it something more, I guess, tangible. Like, okay, this has happened to me. I've experienced this, or I've seen a family member or friend who's had eye strain from being on screen. So I know that there are things that I can do that are in my control to kind of counteract all of that screen time that we all have.
So Ilana from our team at Rupa asked, do blue light blocking glasses really work? And should I use them? And so I'm curious, do you tell people to do both the blue light blocking glasses and the blue light blocking nutrients?
So I tell people that the nutrients should be your foundation. Always start with that, because also as we all get older, the amount of concentration of these macular pigments decline with age. So you always need to boost them and replenish your concentration of them in the retina. So start with that. And then if you experience eye strain, there are different reasons why you could have eye strain, but let's say you're very light sensitive and your eyes are just so fatigued and tired. You can wear the blue blocking glasses, but if you're going to wear them, get the tint that's going to really block the blue light. So not the lighter tint. Like if you have blue blockers that look clear, they're probably barely blocking any of the blue light. Like they're probably only blocking about 10% of the blue light. If your blue blockers are yellow in color, maybe it's blocking like 30% of the blue light that's coming from your screen. And the way you can know is you simply look at your screen and put the blue blockers on. And if you can still see the blue light on your screen, you know it's not blocking all of the blue light. So if you want to get a blue blocker that's really going to block the majority of the blue light, particularly at night, particularly after the sun is set and you don't want the blue light from your screen to interfere with your sleep schedule, etc., get the deeper tinted blue blockers. So for example, you can get deep red or orange or amber. Those tints will block, I would say, about 98, 99% of the blue light. So if you're going to invest in a pair of blue blockers, get a blue blocker that's really going to work for you. The other question I often get is, if I wear my blue blockers during the day, am I like potentially blocking out the beneficial effects of the blue light from the sun, et cetera? And the answer is we don't really know. The truth is we get so much blue light exposure from the sun, from artificial sources. It's probably okay. If you feel like you're more comfortable with your blue blockers, even the lighter colored ones during the day, yes, by all means, you can wear them. I don't think it's really going to impact your sleep schedule that much during the day, if you wear them during the day.
Where can people find the deeply colored blue light blockers you're talking about?
So I can send you a link to a brand that I trust. It's called TrueDark, and I have like various different tints. I have a couple of different ones that I use, and I do use the darker ones at night, but I can share that.
I would love that. Do you have tips for making them more fashionable?
No, unfortunately. Do you have a minute? Can I show you my blue blockers?
Yeah, I want to see them.
Luckily, I had them pretty handy. All right, so these are the lighter tinted ones, and I don't know if you can tell, but it has like a very light, like a yellowish gray tint to it. And so these are about, I believe this is like a 30% blue blocking. So you can see it's not like the most fashionable, but it's very broad. It kind of covers, and it does kind of protect me from like above and from the sides also. So it really does block out like a lot of the light. And then, drum roll for this one.
All right.
These are my nighttime blue blockers. And so when I put these on and I'm looking at the screen, like I don't see any blue at all. Actually, I don't really see many colors except for red. So it does change your color perception. So like if you're doing any work where you really have to distinguish colors on the screen, you're not going to be wanting to wear these. But if you're working into the night and you're having trouble sleeping, it can really help. Again, when I wear these, when I put these on, I can still see pretty much all the different shades of blue on my screen. The other thing that's really helpful is, and a lot of people don't know this, there are apps that you can download that basically like software that will internally take out the blue light from your screen after the sun sets. So it's really after the sun sets that we should be very cautious about our blue light exposure. So the app knows, it's very intelligent. It knows like where you are geographically. So it knows when the sun is rising, when the sun is setting, and it adjusts the temperature, the color temperature of your screen to try to mirror the temperature of the light that you would be getting from the sun. So as the day goes on, there's less than light blue light coming from your screen. And it's a great app, and it actually has a lot of functionality. So I can share that as well. It's called Iris, but it's really a simple way to also help to modulate your blue light exposure. And you can put it on your phone, you can put the app on your computer, your tablet. The only thing you can't put it on is a TV monitor, so that they don't have that functionality yet. But for all your devices, basically, you can put the app on there.
I love that. I've seen people like have a film that they put on their TV, or they'll have like a clear kind of filter that they put on top of their TV. Do those work at all?
Oh, yeah, they can. It's basically like wearing sunglasses for your screen, but it doesn't modulate the light that mirrors like what's naturally happening with the sun rising and setting. So that's the disadvantage of that, is that it's a filter that is pretty much constant throughout the course of the day, versus if you use the app, you're internally removing it. And the other thing, we were just talking about migraines in the last session, but a lot of people with migraine have light sensitivity. And this app, the other benefit of this app, and this is really, really interesting, most people are not aware of this, is that our screens are constantly flickering. So I was saying earlier, like if you go into a store and you see the overhead fluorescent light flickering, imagine that's happening with your screen, milliseconds. The screen's constantly going on, off, on, off, on, off. And the screens, all of our screens are designed to flicker like that to save battery. But that flickering can cause a lot of light sensitivity. It can cause eye strain. It can cause headaches. But this app is so smart, it's so intelligent that it actually takes out the flicker rate. And again, your eyes don't detect it, but your brain can detect this constant flickering because it's at such a high rate. And so when you put the app on, it's almost like, oh, It's almost like such a like relaxing kind of a sensation because all of a sudden the flicker rate is eliminated from your screen.
I am downloading this immediately. I'm so glad you told us about this. I'm curious from you, the way I've heard this described to me, my dad was an engineer who worked in lighting. You're about
Oh,
to
so
say,
you know a lot about it.
well, what he would tell me, and I want to know if this is right. If not, I'm going to call him and be like, Dad, you didn't tell me the technical terms. He would say, like, your eye sees the flickering, but your brain is essentially having to work hard to filter that out so that it looks seamless. And so that actually takes energy from your brain to do that, which is why it's fatiguing, which is why it can contribute to symptoms of migraine. How would you refine that? Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I mean, so our eyes, like our retinal cells, we have rods and cones in the retina that pick up different wavelengths of light. So, yes, our rods and cones are picking up that flickering and then sending that signal to the brain for processing. So, what I meant was our eyes don't see it, meaning when you're looking at something, you don't know it's flickering, as opposed to like if you're seeing an overhead light, you can see it actually flickering, like a fluorescent light. You can't perceive it flickering because the brain is able to filter it out. But some people are so sensitive to it. And it may even happen in people who don't have migraine, where they're just super sensitive to the flickering. It gives them a lot of eye strain and they just can't look at the screen for long periods of time. So it's very common that people are sensitive to the flickering, even though they may not know why it's happening.
It's interesting because when I was seeing patients in the office, I would ask them on their intake, are you sensitive to fluorescent lighting? And I normally had the fluorescent lights off and I would have a dimmer light, just a lamp on when they would come in because I had so many clients telling me fluorescent lights give me a headache. They make my brain hurt. And I feel like most people have never heard that there's some science behind that.
Yeah, yeah. And so aside from the flickering aspect, you were talking about lighting, and I'd be curious to know what your dad's take is on this also. But a lot of us have switched to energy saving bulbs, like, for example, compact fluorescent CFL bulbs or LED bulbs. They're great for the environment because they're saving us energy, but they also emit a lot of blue light. And they don't flicker necessarily, but they do emit a lot of blue light. And so people are really sensitive to that in your home. So, what I suggest for that is for people to consider getting smart bulbs where the temperature of the color temperature of the bulb changes depending on the time of day. Similar to the app, what I was saying, like it can adjust your screen. The bulb can actually adjust the amount of blue light that's coming from it. So in the evening, there's less and less blue light. So it's a cooler temperature during the daytime, and then it's a warmer temperature in the evening at nighttime. And it can also help with sleep also.
Brilliant. I'm learning so much. I'm going to call my dad and tell him he was right. And then I'm going to tell my husband to get ready for me to look like the villain from Aquaman,
Ah, yes.
which is let those red light. Yes.
I
Right.
would never wear these outside. I only wear them at night in the house. They're not the most aesthetic, but they do the trick.
That's what you want. I yell at everyone because I work for Rupa and we're all over the country and the world. And so we have these Zooms that are sometimes late. And I'm telling everybody all the time, wear your blue light blockers. But now I'm going to have to say, not the clear ones, the real ones that Dr. Rani recommends. And I'm going to give them your link. I have so appreciated all of this. And we have a couple conditions I want to get into. I wanted to talk about macular degeneration with you because I think people are hearing us say, well, the macula or macular nutrients. Let's talk about macular degeneration and why it matters so much, particularly in America right now.
Yeah. So, did you know that macular degeneration is the number one neurodegenerative disease in the world? So, the eye is a part of the brain. It's actually an extension of the brain. So, macular degeneration is a neurodegenerative condition. It's more common than Alzheimer's and Parkinson's combined. Like, that's how common it is. And so, I think they estimate that about 11 million people in the US have macular degeneration. Maybe 200 million people around the world have macular degeneration. So, it's really common. And what happens is that there are degenerative changes underneath the retina that happen. And if you think about it from a functional medicine perspective, like what's the root cause of what's going on here? It has to do with oxidative stress. It has to do with mitochondrial dysfunction and inflammation. So there are these three factors that kind of work together to cause changes in the macula. Again, like right here, underneath the retina, there are deposits that form there that are waste deposits. So the waste deposits don't get cleared. They become inflamed. And then you get these new blood vessels that can grow. And this whole process is very slow, but if it gets to an advanced stage, people can really lose vision. They lose their central vision. So imagine like you're seeing in the periphery, but right in the middle, there's a big smudge. Like imagine somebody put a big fingerprint or thumbprint right in the middle of your vision. So you can't read, you can't see faces, you can't drive, you can't use a device because you have this big kind of missing area right in the middle of your vision. So that's what happens in macular degeneration. It tends to affect people who are older, so 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. And there are many risk factors. I mean, there's genetics that we have to take into account, but there's so many other risk factors like diet and lifestyle and toxin exposure. So many different things that may increase your risk for developing vision loss from macular degeneration. It's the sad thing is that it's common and it's preventable. But most people don't know that there are things that they can do to prevent it. And most eye doctors even don't talk to their patients about what they can do to prevent it. And this is kind of like, again, one of those things that I just want to get out there into the world. Like, what are the things people can do to protect their eyesight from macular degeneration? Because there's a lot that you can do that's under your control. There's a lot that you can empower yourself with to protect against blindness.
Because that's what we're talking about. It sounds like if you have macular degeneration, you're going to lose your vision if it progresses.
There are different stages. There is early, intermediate, and advanced. And luckily, only about 10% of people actually go blind, but there are different stages of vision loss that can happen like through the process. So the goal is we want to catch it early, or even before it even starts. You want to catch it and stop it from progressing to its intermediate stage and also progressing to its advanced stage. Because once it gets to the advanced stage, there are treatments out there. I mean, I don't know if you've heard, but people can get injections. They can get shots into the eye of medications to stop the bleeding, to stop inflammation. But by then, you've kind of already lost the opportunity to save vision because people are already legally blind at that point. And it's really they're doing the treatments to prevent against further vision loss, but it's not going to recover what you've already lost. And it's a condition that I like to call leaky eye syndrome. Many of us have probably heard of leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky skin, leaky heart, but this is a type of leaky eye syndrome where the normal blood retinal barrier breaks down. So you get loss of the normal protective barrier and you get blood and fluid and proteins that leak into the retina that shouldn't be there and it causes inflammation. So what can we do to fight against this process of leaky eye? Well, the bottom line is you want to decrease your body's chances of inflammation. You want to optimize your mitochondrial health, and you want to have lots of antioxidants to protect against oxidative stress. And these are all, again, principles that I learned from functional medicine that I was never taught in medical school or residency or fellowship, unfortunately. But these are really the key things people need to do to protect against vision loss.
It's so interesting to me because I feel like we've covered a lot of this already with the nutrients we've discussed. But let's take a step back. It sounds like having high inflammation and high blood sugar and mitochondrial dysfunction are going to predispose you to maybe be at higher risk for developing this condition. We're saying this and we share a language because we're both functional medicine practitioners. But for someone at home who's thinking, well, I don't know if I have mitochondrial dysfunction, like how would I know? What are some conditions or some symptoms that people might be having now that they should pay attention to and try to reverse to reduce their risk for macular degeneration?
Yeah, I mean, I would say because our mitochondria are the powerhouses that provide us with energy, issues with energy. So, fatigue, excess sleepiness, brain fog, migraines, which is another symptom of mitochondrial dysfunction. So, those are the types of things that I would look out for. But when it comes to the eye, you wouldn't necessarily know that you have macular degeneration unless a doctor does an exam and sees it. Because in the earliest stages, people have no idea. This is, again, the thing that's so heartbreaking is that the time period in which we can intervene or start to intervene by doing all these strategies, people have no idea that they have the problem. And so it's not until later on that they may actually get that central area that they're missing. That only happens in the advanced stage. So if you suspect that, okay, I may have a mitochondrial problem, or maybe your doctor's diagnosed you with some mitochondrial problem or inflammation, get an eye exam just to make sure that your eyes are healthy because you may not know in the earliest stages.
And let's explain what you mean by eye exam, because some of us go to our primary care appointment And we look down the hall and we read the smallest line we can read, and maybe they even shine a light in our eyes and ask us to look certain places around the room. Is that what you're talking about, or is it more in depth?
It's more in depth. Yeah. So when you're going for that screening test, you're going to your doctor, it's just measuring visual acuity and your pupils. But if you go to see an eye doctor, either an ophthalmologist or optometrist can do a full eye exam. What we do is we not only check vision, but we actually look at the eye. We look at it under the microscope to see what's going on with the cornea, with the iris, with the lens, et cetera, like all the different parts of the eye that I was sharing with you here. We look at all these different structures under high resolution. And then what we do is we do a dilated exam. And I know a lot of people don't enjoy getting this done because it involves getting drops put in your eye, and these drops will dilate your pupil. So remember I showed you before, this is the iris. And so this center part here is the pupil. So basically it's an opening into the back of the eye. And when we look through the pupil, usually the pupil is small, about 4 millimeters or less. It only gives us a limited view of the retina in the back of the eye. But when we dilate the pupil, we can see basically the full 360 degrees of the retina in the back of the eye. So through an undilated pupil, we see only about 10% of the retina. Through a dilated pupil, we can pick up like everything that's going on back here in the retina. And it's so important because not only can we pick up eye conditions like macular degeneration or glaucoma or cataracts, but also through a dilated eye exam, and I think I did a video for Rupa Health on this recently, we can pick up over 200 medical conditions from a simple eye exam. 200 medical conditions. So it's like a window not just to your soul, it's a window to your health. And a lot of these findings that you would never know about, but it can be picked up from an eye exam because the eye is such a delicate structure. It really is like the canary in the coal mine when it comes to your health. And so we pick up like high blood pressure and diabetes and high cholesterol and autoimmune conditions and even cancers we can pick up from an eye exam. So I know it's kind of inconvenient to get the dilation done, but please go do it. It's recommended that adults over the age of 40 should have an annual eye exam, or at least every 2 years, get your eyes dilated and get it checked out. Get them checked out.
I'm sold. What do you do if you're under 40?
If you're under 40, then I would say it's probably about every 5 years or so, you should get your eyes checked.
Man, 200 conditions. I feel like people don't hear about this.
They don't. They really don't. And they don't realize this valuable test. It's an eye test, but it's not just looking at the chart, but it's a dilated eye exam can really uncover so many hidden conditions. For example, like just the other day, I saw a patient who came in and I didn't have to dilate her for this. I could actually see this without dilating her, but she had her eyes were really puffy, like up here. Her lids were really puffy. Her eyes were wide open like this, and one of her eyes was just a little bit bulging forward compared to the other eye. And I just looked at her and I knew that she had an autoimmune thyroid problem, Hashimoto's. And you wouldn't necessarily make that connection of like, what does my thyroid have to do with my eye health? But there's a lot of connectivity between the eyes and every other organ system in your body. So if you have inflammation, if you have autoimmune inflammation going on somewhere else in your body, it can show up on your eyes in specific ways. So she had no idea that she had this problem. She just thought it was an eye problem. And I said, okay, yes, you have an eye problem. It's called thyroid eye disease, but you also need to be worked up for thyroid problems. And that's how we uncovered the Hashimoto's. So it really is important to get your eyes checked out.
You have some cool testing you do, and I saw you do an Instagram post on this, where you also kind of look at the glands in people's eyes, and this has to do with your treatment of dry eye, which I have a couple of former clients and Rupa colleagues who really wanted to hear your take on ocular surface disease and dry eyes and what causes it. But before we dive in, tell me, like, why are you looking at the glands in people's eyes?
Yeah, so we have these beautiful structures. They're tiny little glands in the eyelid. So if you pull down your eyelid, you see where your eyelashes are coming out from. Just inside of that, there'll be these tiny little dots you can see. And those are actually the openings of the glands. And these are called, they have fancy names, they're called meibomian glands, and they secrete oils to help lubricate the surface of the eye. So they're responsible for keeping the tears in place. The tears don't just evaporate. So a lot of patients with dry eye will actually have dysfunction of their glands as the root cause of their dry eye. So this is really, really important for people to realize about 80% of people with dry eye will have problems with their glands, that their glands are not functioning well, or maybe they're clogged and you're getting styes or infections. These are all gland problems. So in order to treat dry eye, we need to look at the glands and we need to see how healthy they are and also whether they're functioning well. So in my office, and I think this is probably the post that you're referring to, I do imaging of the glands. So it's a non-invasive imaging technique where we just use a little camera device to image the glands and we can actually see the glands. It's beautiful, actually. To me, it's beautiful. This is kind of what I love doing. But we can see the gland structure of the eyelids, the upper and lower lids. We typically have about 25 to 30 glands in each lid. Sometimes the glands start to degenerate or atrophy. And I've oftentimes seen in people who are experiencing hormonal issues, for example, women who are going through perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, they start to lose glands. And why is it? Well, this is really interesting. We actually have hormone receptors in these glands. We have receptors for testosterone and DHA and estrogen and progesterone in these glands. So when people go through midlife and their hormone levels start to change, start to decrease, both for men and women, their glands may be affected and they may suffer from gland loss or glands that are not functioning properly, and they may end up with dry eye. So it's really so important to think about eye issues and think about the root cause of these eye issues, like I was sharing earlier about macular degeneration, because if you can understand the root cause, you can understand how to best treat it. So, for example, a lot of people with dry eye, they just put drops to lubricate. And yes, that's important, but that's not going to necessarily treat the gland problem. And so, to treat the gland problem, you need to apply heat to keep the oils kind of liquefied so they're flowing properly. You need to have enough omegas in your diet, omega 3s in particular, to help promote healthy gland function. And you need to do a little bit of massage. There's actually a treatment that I do in the office for people with gland issues called LipiFlow. So there's a lot we can do to keep our glands healthy that people don't realize. And it's so much more beyond just using eye drops. I should write a book actually beyond eye drops about this, because it's so important for people to understand the structure of the eye and really address the problem and not just put a Band-Aid on the problem.
I would love for you to write that book. Please do that in all your spare time, but like, please do. You even said something on another Instagram post about not using certain types of eye drops with certain ingredients in them. Can you educate our audience? Because maybe they're thinking, oh, you know what? My doctor did tell me to use eye drops and I kind of forgot, or I only use them once a week. Like, what things do people do wrong when it comes to eye drops that could make a difference with the success of that treatment?
Yeah, so this was actually a big news story last year in 2023, where there were certain drops on the market that were found to be contaminated with bacteria, with viruses, with fungi. So really scary. I know it's like shocking to think this, but the facilities just did not have good manufacturing processes. So basically, there were at least, to my knowledge, at least 27 different drops that were recalled by the FDA because they were contaminated. And a lot of these drops were made outside of the US, and a lot of the drops were generics. So the generic drops, or even retail generics, for example, Target, CVS, Walgreens, a lot of their drops were recalled because they were made in these facilities that make generic drops. And so it's really sad what happened. So the reason why this all came to light was because there was a whole series of people in certain states that developed eye ulcers, corneal ulcers, and other types of infections. And people initially couldn't figure out, like, is this a pattern? Like, what's causing this? What's it related to? And then they realized that these patients were all using these generic eye drops. And so the contamination was the cause of their eye infection. And this is really, really sad. So not only did the eye drops cause this problem with infections, there were 3 people who used the drops and the contaminated, whatever the bacterium was, I don't know the exact one. I think one of them was Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So it actually got into their bloodstream. It got into their lungs, caused pneumonia, and they passed away. And for 2 other people, it actually got into their bloodstream. They had sepsis and they passed away. So it's just so heartbreaking to hear stories like this, because this is something that people thought that they were doing for their eye health to keep themselves healthy. And unfortunately, it ended up causing morbidity and even mortality in some cases. And so my recommendation was, if you're going to choose an eye drop, it's not that you can't take eye drops. Not all eye drops are bad, but you need to choose an eye drop that comes from a reputable manufacturer. So look for an eye drop that's made by a big brand, because they have safety procedures in place. They have good manufacturing processes in place. They test their products before putting them out on the market. So Brands like Refresh or Systane or TheraTears or Soothe, these are trusted brands as opposed to some of the retail generics on the market. It's really, really sad that that all happened, but it just kind of opened our eyes, pun intended, to how important it is to choose quality products when you're thinking about your personal care. So important. And the same goes for vitamins. A lot of people choose generics because they're cheaper. I understand that, but sometimes the generics aren't made with the best ingredients and they can sometimes cause more harm than good. So always look for high quality ingredients in your products and good manufacturing processes from the provider, from the supplier.
Now, in the same way we're supposed to look at labels for the foods we eat and make sure that there aren't certain harmful ingredients, it sounds like there are harmful ingredients that could also be in eye drops, like certain types of alcohol that might actually dry your eye out more. Are there things that you train your patients to look for and try to avoid?
Yes. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that because a lot of people think all eye drops are made the same, but they have all kinds of different ingredients for lubrication. And there's one particular ingredient called polyvinyl alcohol or PVA, which is in a lot of the generic drops. But unfortunately, that ingredient is not pH balance for the eye. It can actually cause a lot of burning and irritation and even toxicity to the cornea. So I know that, again, a lot of the generics have this in them, but steer away from anything where you see alcohol in the name. Just say, no, I'm not going to get that. The other thing that some people may be sensitive to are some of the preservatives in the eye drops. So BAK, benzalkonium chloride, I believe. I may have missed a syllable in there somewhere, but BAK is the ingredient, which is a preservative in a lot of the eye drops, but it can also cause irritation, sensitivity. Some people even develop an allergy to it. So if you're allergic to that particular preservative, it's in a lot of the eye drops on the market. Look for preservative-free, basically single-use vials where you get a couple of drops in a single-use vial. So you use it and then you toss it at the end of the day and you use a different vial every day. So that's one alternative if you're sensitive to BAK.
This is amazing information. And I'm curious from you, like, it sounds like dry eye disease is becoming more common. And do you have an opinion about why that might be?
Yes, and it goes back to screen time. So we're all on screens, adults and kids alike, and for a good reason. Like, for example, we're doing this podcast right now, we're on a screen. So it really helps our productivity, but it can have a toll on our eye health. So when we look normally, let's first talk about just normal. When we're looking around, we blink about 15 to 20 times a minute. When we're looking at a screen, we're only blinking about 4 to 5 times a minute. And so when we're not blinking enough, we're really focused on something, or even if you're reading a book, you're just not blinking enough because you're really focused on reading that, your tears will dry out. So no matter how healthy your meibomian glands are and your oils are, your tears are going to evaporate if you're only blinking 4 or 5 times a minute. So that's one reason why dry eye has been increasing in prevalence. Also, there's a lot more toxins in the air. There's a lot more pollution in the air, and that can definitely contribute to dry eye or even cooking fumes. I know some patients of mine, especially in the warmer weather, they love to barbecue, and they really suffer from a lot of dry eye when they're exposed to all those fumes coming from their cooking. So I always tell them, like, wear protective goggles when you're cooking to really shield your eyes from all of that toxin that's in the air. So there's a lot that can be contributing to dry eye. Also, we are talking earlier about, when I was talking about the glands, I was talking about hormones. And so when people have hormonal changes, that's also going to contribute to dry eye. So we know that our population is aging over the years. And so there's a lot more dry eye in that elderly population as well.
So it sounds like whether someone has dry eye or they're worried about their vision or they're worried about macular degeneration, there are specific nutrients that might be really helpful for them to focus on. And you've actually developed a quiz that helps people determine which. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I realized, I always get asked this question like, oh, Dr. Rani, I have dry eye, like which foods should I eat? Or I have cataract, which foods can I eat to prevent it from getting worse? And I decided to help them answer that question by creating a quiz online. So it's called the Nutrition IQ Test, EYEQ. And basically, it takes like 5 minutes. It's pretty simple. You answer some questions about your medical history, your eye history, your family history, and then it will give you a personalized report for what types of areas of the eye you should focus on. So whether you have dry eye, you should focus on the cornea. Whether you have cataracts, you should focus on the lens. Whether you have macular degeneration, you should focus on the retina. So it'll give you a code. And then what you do is, that's your personalized code as to which nutrients you should focus on. Then you look in the book, in my book, Beyond Carrots, I highlight basically like 40 foods in the book. So under each food, there will be a code also. So you match up what you got in your response, run the IQ test or nutrition IQ test, and you find the foods in the book that match up with that. So then you can tailor your nutrition to what your eyes need. So it's a quick and simple way to do it. So there may be like specific foods, like I have dry eye, I really need to focus on the omegas, and it'll tell you like which foods will support your dry eye. So yeah, it's a simple way to do it.
Wow, I love that. That's so great. IQ test, everyone. EYEQ.
Sorry, I want to correct you. It's a nutrition IQ test. And I also have a separate test called the IQ test. If you just want to find out how healthy your eyes are and get a score, you can take the IQ test. Or if you want to find out about nutrition, take the nutrition IQ test.
Take both, everyone.
5 minutes.
Yeah. And then you have multiple books that you've written about these topics that actually takes everything we're talking about, but then really translates it into the kitchen. Can you tell folks what are the titles of all your books and why might they choose one over the other to start with?
Yeah, so the first book I published was called Beyond Carrots, Best Foods for Eye Health A to Z. So in that book, that's like my baby. I worked on this over the pandemic, and then I really want to get this information out there, not only for patients or just the layperson, but also for my colleagues in the eye world space, because they don't know, like we were never taught. So I wanted to also educate them about, okay, what is it that our eyes really need to stay healthy? And so in that book, that's a great starting point if you just want to find out how the eye works and what are the nutrients, and then what are all these amazing foods that you can include in your diet to ward off eye disease. And then I have some recipes in there as well. And then I have a whole chapter on supplements. So if you're curious about supplementation to also enhance your dietary intake of these nutrients, you can take a look at that. And then if you love to be in the kitchen, I have a separate cookbook. Actually, I have two versions of it. One is the Dr. Rani's Visionary Kitchen Cookbook. It's got over 200 recipes. And all of the recipes, I selected those recipes because they include foods that are the therapeutic foods for eye health. So they have foods that provide multiple nutrients, not just like one or two nutrients from this particular recipe. You're going to get a whole spectrum of nutrients from each recipe. And I have a plant-based version as well for those of you who are plant-based. So there's Beyond Carrots, then there's the Visionary Kitchen, and then the plant-based Visionary Kitchen.
This is so cool. I want to thank you so much for publishing these books, for being here with us today, and for your continued commitment to educate people. So I am following you on Instagram. I would love for you to tell our listeners, where can they follow you to continue to learn more from you? What's your website? How do they stay in touch?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. I loved our conversation and getting into the topic that is so near and dear to my heart. So the best way to contact me or to reach out to me is through my website, which is my name, drranibanik.com. And there are links to my books, also links to my shop if you're interested in any of the supplements. I do have some supplements that are curated for eye health. So I have Nourish, which is a complete multi with bioflavonoids. I have Fortify that has all the macular carotenoids and more. And then I have the Complete Omega, which is I call it the Ageless Eyes Bundle. So you can have ageless eyes. And then if you're on Instagram, I'm at dr.ranibanik. And I share a lot of eye health tips, but also nutrition tips and also tips on migraine as well. So if you have migraine or you know somebody who does, they can also learn a lot from that.
Brilliant. And it's dr.ranibanik.
Yes. Yep, that's correct.
Amazing. I can hear everyone typing as we speak. You are now our eye health expert at Rupa. I cannot wait to have you back to talk about glaucoma, cataracts. We have so many questions for you. Thank you for giving us the masterclass today on dry eye, macular degeneration, and overall eye health. You are amazing. We will see you soon.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share this message. I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.